Okay, so as the title says, today I'll be doing something relatively simple. At least I think it's simple. I was told that this community is strong with like indie developers and entrepreneurs. So I've met them since coming, a lot of them since coming to the mobile gaming industry, and my sense is that you guys are strongly focused on development and creating good products for your customers. And sometimes you guys end up having some questions on, how we can potentially incorporate analytics into your games to help the development process, understand your players better, and essentially grow your product. Okay, so what I decided to do today is to present some simple solutions or relatively simple solutions to kind of get your feet wet in the analytics side of the business. Okay, so first things first, let's see if I get this thing to work. Small shameless plug for the company that I'm currently working for, Reality Games. We are a free to play company like many companies. We've got a few good titles out there right now, some a little more successful than others, and hopefully a few coming in the pipeline in 2021, but more realistically, probably 2022. That's my guess. But anyway, that's the company that I work for. A quick intro to myself. So I am relatively new to the mobile gaming industry. I've been working at Reality Games for almost a year and a half, and it's my first adventure into mobile gaming. I didn't really know that I was old until I got here. It's an industry that is very young, very entrepreneurial, and I'm 40, and I'm absolutely one of the oldest people in the company, and typically one of the oldest people at the conference whenever I attend conferences, before COVID, of course. My background, though, is in analytics. So I've worked in finance, I've worked in grocery retail for a very long time, consulting, and telecom. It was all centered around analytics. And what I found was that there was a common thread across each industry. And I would say that I'm not so sure who else is on this call. Maybe it's only people in mobile gaming, or maybe there are some people that want to break into mobile gaming. I would say from my own experience is that there's absolutely opportunity to crossover. So I can't say that this industry is, uniquely dominated by people that grew up in games and have been gamers their entire lives. Obviously, that helps. But people from other industries can absolutely, contribute and learn the industry and provide new, unique perspectives. So customers is really where I see it, right? And I saw it in every single aspect of each of the industries I worked in. But when I got here, I was really overwhelmed by the amount of data that's being generated. The game data, some games appear to be very simple, but the reality is that it just depends on what you want to look at and the types of data you want to collect. It can be really complex. Okay, and then if you also want to include some of the other third-party data services that are out there, especially around marketing and growth, there's a ridiculous number of them. Then you're talking about many, many, many data sources that that's really difficult to kind of incorporate. So I felt that I was getting overwhelmed, especially when I first arrived, and quickly I started realizing that I need to adopt a one piece at a time strategy. I think there's like an old proverb that goes, how do you eat an elephant or a whale or something like that? And the answer is one piece at a time. You can't eat the whole thing in one go, but you may be able to eat it over time. So that's essentially what I'm trying to do. Okay, so the agenda today, it's really in three pieces. I'm going to recommend some first steps to get you going on an analytics journey. That includes this product called Firebase from Google and another product from Google called BigQuery. Okay, I'm not being paid for any product endorsements. I'm only telling you what my personal experience is. And then I want to get into a real case study using a level up analytics event to kind of identify very simply to identify where players may be getting stuck in your games, where they're deciding to pay, and a small little bit on identifying some cheaters, because we all have cheaters in the game. So let's get into the first bit, and I want to just tell you this: my presentation is not going to go a full hour, so that may be good news for some people on the call, or maybe not. Maybe you're expecting me to talk for a very long time, but I don't think it's going to go a full hour. The Firebase SDK right here, I think it's nicely summarized in this screenshot. The first pillar here, the build feature, I think is really more for you guys possibly. If you need help with some authentication services or a number of other things, Firebase can give that to you. Absolutely. But if not, it's still pretty good for analytics. So this is where I really want to focus on that second pillar. There's Crashlytics, which is pretty neat. I wouldn't recommend it as the only source to track, the health of the app, but it's still a really good service. And then Google Analytics, and this is really the focus, of this talk today. The last piece is still incredibly important and interesting. There are these other services called remote config and cloud messaging. Cloud messaging is, you can send push notifications based on a lot of different, let's say, in-game events, app events, or timed push notifications as well, or one-off notifications. It's really quite nice. And then there's this thing called remote config. And the remote config is a really nice feature to do what's called A/B testing. So if you want to change some different things in the app and you want to see what the real effect is on it, you'd use remote config, and you would implement those different pieces, those different adjustments to your app on different segments. So you'd be able to measure the effect of them. So anyway, it's free to get started on Firebase, and I'd recommend it. As I said, we use it and fairly effectively. So Firebase analytic events. Okay, so like I said, I want to focus now on the analytics side. These events essentially are moments in the game when something happens. So let's say, for example, if a customer makes a purchase on a bundle that you may have, or if they just start a new session, Firebase will automatically fire those events, right? So, and they'll get sent. Sorry, the app will fire it, the SDK will fire it, and it'll be collected in Firebase. Okay, and there's many other sort of automatically collected events. So these are good starts, and you can absolutely do kind of a lot of, you can get a lot of insight from these things. But there's many other things that you can do as well, many other analytic events that you can capture. On the Firebase documentation, there's actually a specific set of events under games where if you were to implement these as they've described here, these events will appear automatically in your dashboard, which I'm going to share in a moment, and it'll give you some nice dashboarding automatically, which is of course very, very nice. On top of this, though, so you guys can imagine, especially if you got a more complex game, Firebase also gives you the ability to custom program any event that you want. You can do, you've got a special event that, is not on this list that you still don't want to track, you can put it in here, but it won't automatically populate on your dashboard. So just keep this in mind. So here's an example, of the dashboard. If you were to implement the Firebase SDK, things like DAU, MAU, some important conversion events, how long people are in your app, where your users are from, where they're coming from, and the amount of revenue you might be getting from your app. The thing with this is that what happens though, this is a really nice start. Like I said, I mean, it's great. Now you can get pretty good visibility into how your app, and there's areas that you can drill down into as well. But what if you need something more custom? As I mentioned, you might have some events that that Firebase won't populate automatically into their dashboard. Well, in that case, or if you want to do any more deep diving or any more ad hoc analysis, thankfully, Google has a solution for that as well, and that's called Google BigQuery. Okay, so just the pitch here is that serverless highly scalable and cost-effective multi-cloud data warehouse designed for business agility. That's a hell of a statement, actually. But it sounds really, really nice. And they also try to get you here. They got $300 in free credits to spend on Google Cloud for the first 90 days. So of course, that's a great incentive to get started on this particular platform. Depending on the size of your game, the nice part about this as well is that depending on the size of your game, if you're just starting out and you got a small user base, relatively small user base, this is all basically free, especially if you've not programmed, hundreds of events. This is all free. So it's awesome, really. It's truly awesome. It's a great way to get a hold of your data. Write a few SQL queries. SQL is always nice. It's the one language that seems to be, standing the test of time. Even for old guys like me, right? There's a lot of people that are not necessarily even, analytics based, that know some SQL. So this is a very powerful tool because now you can get some of this raw data in the hands of maybe some of your teammates fairly easily. Okay. Thing is though, like I said, it sounds like a nice analytics solution, but how do I get my Firebase data into BigQuery? Right? So I'll show you this as well, and it's ridiculously simple. Okay, so just a few easy steps. You're on the Firebase console here. This is what it looks like if you have a project. It's a little test project here. You click on project settings, and then you go to this BigQuery integrations, and you click manage. Okay, pretty easy actually to do this. Last step here, once you're in this manage menu, all you do is you need to toggle this. Okay. And all of a sudden, everything is basically done for you. I mean, this is going to be the easiest data pipeline, ever created in the history of data pipelines, quite honestly. And there's some other stuff that, lower down in this menu, there's some other stuff that you can also toggle, like Crashlytics, and they also got this really cool predictions module. Again, also performance monitoring or cloud messaging. Again, if you're sending out messages, you can kind of do some analytics possibly on top of those messages as well. But the Google Analytics is really the core, behind this. So essentially what you've just done is all that stuff that's coming through to your Firebase console, all of the raw events data that they're, dashboarding for you, all of this is now just getting pumped immediately to, BigQuery. Okay, so like I said, super easy data pipeline, just like this. Doesn't cost you basically anything or very, very little, right? So, now what do you do? Okay, now you've done everything. I don't know how long it would take you possibly to install the SDK, but like I said, the BigQuery integration is super simple, super fast. You take a break. You need to actually take a break because, you need to give Firebase some time to export this raw data to BigQuery. So I'd suggest 1 day break, and then the next day you're ready. Okay, so just type in Google Cloud Platform into Google. You go to your GCP platform, and then you just click Query. Okay, you select your project and you click Query. And once you're there, you're in this really nice sort of, let's say, SQL browser setup. Your data sources over here. Here's your data set that's being collected automatically from Firebase. Under this data set, there's this events table, partition table, and then you just query it. Okay, just like any other, select star from blah, 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 right? It works exactly the same way. So this now gives you that power to write custom SQL statements, do some really cool ad hoc analysis, create some neat data sets. And if you get a little bit more advanced, you can even do some scheduled queries inside BigQuery. The fairly, basic scheduler, but like I said, for a small shop or, 1 or 2 guy operation, it works great. Right, it works really, really great. I think it fits those types of situations very, very well. So there you are, right? So there you are. I took you through the first 2, agenda points. As I said, I'll be moving fairly quickly. I don't have a full hour's worth of content, but that'll get you set up. And as I mentioned, now on top of this, actually, before maybe I got a little ahead of myself, I did mention that through BigQuery you can build your own tables. And then on top of this, what's really nice, there's a third integration that I left out of the presentation, but it's very, very easy. It's called Google Data Studio. Of course, another Google product. And again, Google is a pretty smart company. They've made some really very easy integrations. So you open up Data Studio again under the same account. It's automatically connected to your BigQuery service. You just navigate to the data set that you want to, to the data table that you want to report on. You connect to it, and then all of a sudden you can now start visualizing your data, right? Create some neat charts and graphs and things, and some filters in different dimensions, and you can share that with whoever you want very easily with a shareable link. I highly recommend, again, for small shops, or mid-sized shops, it's a really great solution. And again, it's mostly free. So, I got questions about this in the past, and I'm not, I'm fairly conservative with my money, and I would say that this is still a really good solution that can scale fairly easily for most games. Okay, and I would not be wary of any major cost implications. I mean, unless your game is just massive. Okay. Okay, so the last section I wanted to do was to do a small deep dive into this Level Up Analytics event. Okay, so as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, we needed to create a custom Firebase Analytics event called Level Up. Okay, and in this Level Up event, we're passing one parameter. Okay, and that parameter is the level that the customer achieved. So if they're progressing through the game and they make it to level 5, the Level Up event will fire. It will be collected in Firebase, and the parameter, the value behind it, will be 5. Okay, so that'll happen every single time a player reaches a new level. It'll report the level that they achieved. So we're going to use this event, and we're going to combine it with some of the other events like purchase data and player tenure, meaning how long they've been in the game, to draw some really neat, basic insight. Okay, so let's move to the first one. Oh yeah, and then I have to mention that some of the data that you'll be seeing is some fairly old data from our original title, Landlord Tycoon. This is a real life property real estate game. If you've not checked it out, I would ask you guys maybe to download it and play a little bit this weekend. And don't be shy. Feel free to maybe make an in-game purchase or watch a few ads. Anyway, the first piece of data that I wanted to show you guys was a distribution of the Level Up event. Okay, so this is a fairly easy exercise. All I did was I took the main sample, which is over a million Level Up events in this particular time frame, and I just wanted to see how many of these Level Up events were fired, right, per level, right? And I just created a distribution that adds to 100%. Okay, so 17% of all the level ups are level 2. Okay, and this is the shape that I would think you would normally expect on, let's say like a Level Up event, right? Because most people go through level 2, and not everybody makes it to level 3 or 4, all these other things, and in this decreasing order, because we're of course experiencing some customer churn along the way. Now, the first thing I wanted to mention out here is that why is it that in level 3, only 5.8% of our Level Up events are happening? In level 4, it's 10.7%. This makes no sense logically. And you're right, it doesn't make any sense. And once we created this distribution, we realized that someone messed up the config. Basically, what was happening was that players were leveling to level 2, no problem, but they were skipping level 3. And this could happen possibly, because of the amount of, let's say, in-game currency that we gave the player to start the game. May have been a little bit too high. But at the same time, this type of issue is not really a major issue. You're essentially just going from level 2 to level 4. There's no real in-game impact. Okay, so this is not a colossal, mess up. Okay, by any stretch, but this is kind of an interesting data point that I wanted to point out. The second thing that you may have or may not have already noticed is that something looks a little bit suspicious right here. Okay. As we look down the distribution, we're seeing sort of like I wouldn't call it a loss because this is just a distribution, but we're seeing a decrement, I believe is the right English word, and the percentage of total level up events on that particular level. Right. At level 9, this reduces, let's say, a little bit more than what we experienced over the last few levels. Okay, but we don't have enough information at this stage to draw any conclusions. So we need to do another, let's say, piece of analysis. This is where we brought in on this slide, on this piece, this is where we brought in the average tenure of players. Okay, so this is where we're mixing some data. We're mixing the level up event with some tenure data. A nice piece with some of those Firebase front end events that we're getting in BigQuery is that they're attaching a lot of other sort of useful data to the event. So not only will it give us, like, let's say, the player ID and the timestamp and the level that they reached, but it will also give us some other interesting stuff on, of course, like what device they're using, what platform they're on, what country they're, using their device in. And it'll give us the start date. Essentially, when did they start? When did they first open up that app? And it's really nice because we don't have to really mix any data, with this data point. This data is already like almost put together for us perfectly. So when we do summarizations, all we have to do is include a sort of a time calculation function on top of one of the fields that we have in the data, and we can get player tenure. And so this is what we've done. So what this basically means that to reach level 2, on average, players take 2 days. Okay, seems kind of long actually, but that's the average. And then 3, it's 4 days. 4, it's almost 5, and then we got 6, and then we got 8, and 13, and then 20. So you may not notice this, but this is a good sized jump here. But to notice this a little bit better, what I did is I took the difference in the average tenure versus the previous level. So I just did 3 minus 2, right? Level 3 minus 2, level 2, 4 minus 3, 5 minus 4, 6 minus 5, so on and so forth, right? Get this delta. And once we get this delta, we can start seeing where the separation's happening. So this is where where, like I said on the previous slide, where something looks suspicious, but I didn't know what it was. So this essentially is from going from level 7 to level 8, it took 3 days, but level 8 to level 9, it took almost 7 days. So this is significantly different, on average. And I wanted to dig into this a little bit. So players are getting stuck. Oh, sorry, I messed up the animation here. The question really is that players getting stuck's bad, right? Maybe that's what you're thinking. It's bad. We got to resolve this. Something's really problem. Well, I'd say it depends. Okay, like a lot of things in life, it depends. So the next piece of information to work on to determine if it's bad or not is that we have to look at monetization. Okay, so again, with this nice Firebase data, we don't only get their time that they started using the app, the date that they started using the app, but they're also giving us a running total of the money that this particular player has paid us through in-app purchases. And this is a really nice feature as well. Okay, so what I ended up doing is I wanted to know, at each level, what percentage of our players have paid us money, have just made any type of payment on their account. And as you can see, level 2, 3, 4, it's very, very, very little. So that means basically of all the people, for example, here that reach level 8, only about 5% of them have paid us any money. Okay. And many, many people, before they reach level 8, they're already gone, right? Because this is free to play. So this is just high churn, right, in this area. You see something interesting happening here, right? At level 9, this payer rate increases significantly. Level 10, it jumps. 11, it jumps. And so by this time, that we reach this level, they start plateauing, which is a whole nother, let's say, issue that we're not going to get into today. They start plateauing. Essentially, this means that, like I said, when they reach level 13, about 25 to maybe 26% of the players have paid us. I don't know why this thing is getting stuck. have paid us anything. Okay. To this point, not necessarily at that level, but to that point in their player tenure, 25 to 26% of them have made at least one payment. So then again, monetization's good, right? Right? It's really good. Well, again, that depends. Okay. So what I'm trying to say here is that, there's a few data points that we really need to kind of put together. And the insight here is that at level 9, our players ran out of starting game resources. Okay, that's what we eventually figured out after we dug a little bit deeper, which is causing that kind of like blockade, right? So their progress slowed considerably. This forces them to make a decision. Okay, this is really key. It's like this fork in the road, but it's like a three-pronged fork. Most forks are three-pronged at least, actually. So, but anyway, it doesn't matter. They can either quit the game, which a lot of them do, unfortunately. They can start to grind for in-game resources. Quite honestly, I love those players, right? I love them because they're really up for a challenge. And we have other ways to monetize through ads if they'd like. But essentially, what they're doing is they're saying that I like your game. I don't really want to pay you money for whatever reason. And but I may not mind watching some ads, which is a really nice way also to monetize very, very slowly. And the third option, of course, is for them to make a payment, because they just want to make progress. Okay. And the key is progress. And I think you guys know that that is typically through player surveys that I've seen. It's the number one objective in most games. So if you find that your players are not making progress and they're getting stuck and there's no way to get out of that, that's a serious problem that you have in your game. You guys probably already know that anyway. So in terms of recommendations at that stage, A/B testing, and I would recommend A/B testing wherever you can, because there's always going to be some hypotheses, right, and some change. But what I've also seen here is that there's a tendency to skip this step in practice. Why? Because it's just not fun, right, to measure stuff. Okay, it's much more fun to hypothesize about what should be done and try to implement it and then see it live in the game. But again, if you don't A/B test it, you don't know what your increment is going to be. Okay, and this is really where it needs to come down to. Now we understand why the data looks the way it does, but we still don't know the right reason. Okay, so one of the possible options is to adjust the leveling up config to speed up or slow down the player's progress, or start with different types of in-game resources. So in this case, for example, in option 1, we decide to reduce starting resources. This would ideally prompt more payments because they wouldn't get stuck at level 9, but they'd get stuck at level 8 possibly, or maybe level 7. And possibly the player wouldn't have churned by that time, and possibly we could convince them to make a purchase. But of course, by that time, if we get them stuck a little bit earlier, we could actually even increase churn. Okay, and then of course option 2 could be vice versa. And I just listed 2 options here, but you guys can probably already think of a few different ways, right, to kind of tackle this. But what I would really recommend almost more than anything before you implement anything is to more deeply analyze where and how customers become hooked on your game concept, because that's really where you need to be. That's the space that you need to be in, is that we need to make it kind of easy for them to get addicted to your game, for to be very brutal and blunt. You need to get them addicted to your game. And any blockade before that, especially in free to play, it's very, very dangerous. Okay, because in the free to play model, right, everything is free, so there's very little investment, and players will get discouraged and get discouraged very quickly. So they won't have any patience at all for anything that's going to stop them from being interested in your game initially. Okay, so in this case, like I said, the paywalls are effective when you have players that really want to proceed. And when I say paywalls, I don't really mean like paywalls. Everybody hates pay to win, but at the same time, we all need to make some money because we all have bills to pay. Okay, so we have to figure out some way to incentivize or maybe motivate people to pay, but they have to be at the right stage, right, of the process. And the second bit, and I can't emphasize this enough, is to really help your decision-making process, you need to take this analysis one step further. So for example, here's just one example. We see at level 9, players get stuck, like I said. The best thing to do, probably to take this analysis further, is to figure out all the players that make it to level 9 and divide them into two pieces: those that stop and those that go forward. Okay. And then what you do is you look back and you pull together some of the other data history on what those players experienced between level 1 and level 9. And this could be across multiple dimensions. So this is where the analysis gets really kind of hairy, but also very, very interesting. So you could look at stuff like, of course, did they make a payment or anything? But how many sessions did they do? Um, how long did they spend in the session? What features did they touch? Many of your apps have multiple features. Like for us, as I said in the landlord game, we've got features where you can buy properties from the bank, you can buy properties from other players, you can buy properties from the marketplace, you can sell properties, you can make offers to other properties, you can upgrade properties, you can upgrade your skills. All these things, these are all different features that we have in our game. And a very interesting piece of analysis would be to say, of these two groups, what features did they use before they hit level 9? And this will start giving you some understanding, about what did these guys do and how did we get them hooked versus how did we cause them to churn. Okay. So that was the first kind of the bit. I want to touch briefly on cheaters, and then I'll be done. Okay, I promise you. Here's a second piece of analysis using the exact same data, okay, using level up data. And what I did here is I made it a little bit simpler. I grouped some of these levels into smaller groups, and I just calculated the average tenure in days. Okay, but what I did differently here is that the blue group is everybody. So this is payers and non-payers. And the red group is just the non-payers. Okay, so what you can see fairly clearly is that they start progressing very evenly in early stages of the game. But as I mentioned, at level 9, when people start paying, they can advance their progress a little bit faster. And this is why you see, slightly lower average tenure in this group, 9 to 15 group, than you do for the non-payer group. Right? It makes obvious sense. There's payers in this group, and there's only non-payers in this group. And this delta kind of maintains. When you get to this stage where you've got players that that in the non-payer group somehow have average tenure that's lower than the levels 23 through 30 group. Right? This doesn't make any sense. Like, how is this even possible, right? Conceptually. Well, if people were playing the right way and not cheating, you'd never see data like this. But the problem is players cheat. And for various reasons, mostly because they want to be number one. So what we ended up having to do is we had to do another super deep dive investigation into this one. And we found that a small percentage of those non-payer accounts were reaching very high levels very quickly, right? So going from, let's say, level 1 to level 40 or 50 or 60, right? Right? That's how they're jumping all of those levels, and they're landing in, this 31 plus bucket. So let me explain what's happened. Okay, so I mentioned already that our app has a player-to-player property offer. Okay, it kind of increases engagement in the game and makes it truly a multiplayer game. Well, of course, some of the more entrepreneurial players that we have out there were making offers to themselves. Okay, so that they created these new dummy fake accounts. They had this master account that was like level 100 something, and they had really expensive assets, property assets, right? Whatever, Eiffel Tower, whatever. You can buy everything basically in the world if you're, if you got enough in-game currency for it. So what they essentially did is they made this Eiffel Tower offer, this dummy account would make an offer for this Eiffel Tower, right, from the master account, and offer them just some small, tiny amount of money. Okay, and of course, this master account would accept that offer, and the Eiffel Tower would be transferred to this low-level dummy account. Well, because this Eiffel Tower is so valuable, right, and our progress is linked to the empire value that you have in your account, this dummy account went immediately from level 0 to level 40, right? And you'd say, why are they doing that? Right? Well, they do that because our game is structured this way. At every single level up, you get some free additional in-game currency to kind of keep you going. Not a ton, but some of it. Okay, but if you get that all in one go, then all of a sudden that's really kind of beneficial. So then what happens is after he levels up like crazy, the dummy account is now dead. It's not really required. They do another P2P transfer to bring the Eiffel Tower back to the master account. And then the master account has some stupid little dummy property, like, maybe not stupid, but just like a tiny little low value property. And he sells it to the dummy account for all of that in-game currency that he just earned. Right? So it makes a transfer like this. Okay, so the master account now has the Eiffel Tower again and all of that free game in-game currency, right? And then this dummy account basically just goes dead, lights out, right? Never gets accessed again. And then guess what happens? They do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again, right? And so we were getting massive cheating. And again, these dummy accounts are like 2 days old, 3 days old, and this is what's driving down this average, right? This is why this average looks lower here than here, because these guys are jumping like level 40, level 50, level 60. Okay, so then what did we have to do? Well, once we found this, we banned them. Okay, we banned these owners, and unfortunately, these guys were, fairly engaged with the game. But we developed a policy where we don't allow cheating. Now, I do understand for a lot of developers, I mean, and us included, when I say we don't have we have a zero tolerance for cheating, it doesn't mean we wipe their account, but they will be punished. Okay. In some cases, we had to wipe their account. It was just massive scale cheating. Okay. But in a lot of cases, what we do is we do short-term bans. Maybe sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's 7 days. It sends a message to the player that we're watching and we don't tolerate it. Okay. After that, we keep a record of it, and of course, if there's more abuse, then the punishments escalate. And what we do in the game is we reduce the amount of in-game resources given out at each level up. So this essentially discourages customers from this process of cheating or using dummy accounts to farm currency, because they're just not getting what they used to get. Okay, and an interesting fact around this is we realized that after we did that, our monetization actually increased a bit. Why? Because our original config we were too generous. So when we were giving away in-game currency, we gave away too much, and players didn't need to buy anything from us. Okay, so once we reduced that gift, it encouraged players to actually purchase more resources from the bank. And then the last thing was that we put caps on asset value that we can transfer to our low level account. Okay, so let's say an account that's level 100 is trading with an account that's level 1. I mean, that makes 0 sense at all. Okay, that would never ever happen in let's say in the game, because there's nothing that level 1 account would have that the level 100 account would ever want. Okay, so we said basically is that, on certain levels, you cannot trade assets that are of certain value, okay, to put some controls on that. And doing these different steps, we cleaned up cheating significantly in the game. So just to recap, okay, recap the whole thing. Many low cost or free tools are out there. You guys probably know about it, but just to recap, you probably already used this, I'm guessing, but Firebase SDK for analytics and events and some limited dashboarding. Even if you only do that, you're still in a good spot. The BigQuery integration, that gives you the power of SQL, and to really kind of start to rip apart and analyze some detail and do some custom analysis on your side. Again, the integration between Firebase and BigQuery really cannot be easier. Really, it can't. And as I mentioned briefly before, there's this other product that Google has called Data Studio. It connects very, very easily to Google Spreadsheets if you want, or Google BigQuery tables. Just literally just a few clicks of the button, and with these tools, you're in a really great spot to do a ton of different data analysis, like fairly easily, and like I said, fairly cost effective. Um, Second thing I mentioned at the top is that, don't get discouraged. If you think it's overwhelming, I get it. I get it. I felt the same way. Okay. But it's really key to start somewhere. And once you start and you start realizing what you know, you'll also start realizing what you don't know at the same time. And you can kind of figure out what your next bite is going to be. Okay, and the last thing here is that you need to start, when you start this journey, you need to start looking at the most important measures for your customers. And I mentioned it before, and I can't stress this enough, is that progress. It is very, very important to understand if your players are making progress. Okay, and it just means that, in a lot of ways, progress can be defined by, for example, if your tutorial is a mess, that for whatever reason, it's broken. There's points that make the app crash. All these other things. You're essentially stopping progress in the end. If your level up parameters are not set right, or if you've got some sort of matching game, right, and there's a particular level that's ridiculously hard, right, and you're finding a lot of player drop off right at that level, that's a problem. Okay, so you need to figure out what is the right healthy way to continue to allow your player to progress, because it is the number one goal of most players. And of course, the second bit is what's important for you, right? As a business, as I mentioned, you got to pay bills. Let's be realistic. It's not just about pleasing customers. I mean, it would be great if we could do that, but you also need to be able to afford to pay yourself. Okay, so these are the first bits that you really need to focus on. And the last one, sorry, I thought it was the last bullet point, but stay curious and keep digging. I promise you, once you start on this process, and if you were to do these things that I've noted, um, it'll just kind of feed the fire, right? It'll feed the fire, and you'll want to keep finding out more and more and more about what's going on inside your game. And I highly, urge you to, just continue to feed that curiosity, and your apps and your business are only going to benefit from this. Okay, and that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening, and good luck.